The room was silent, except for the faint buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. Kenneth Lay sat alone, his once broad shoulders now hunched, the weight of 1,000 invisible stones pressing him down. Outside the courthouse walls, journalists screamed his name, microphones collided like weapons, and cameras flashed with merciless precision. But inside here, in this sterile box of justice, there was no applause, no boardroom ovation, no false promises of power. Only judgment. Only the echo of a man who had once ruled empires, reduced to a trembling shadow on a wooden bench. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the chaos faded. He could almost hear the applause again, the roar of investors intoxicated by dreams of limitless profit. The Enron logo glowing blue against the Houston skyline like a New Age cathedral. He had built this temple, brick by brick, lie by lie. And now the temple had collapsed, crushing him beneath its ruins. "Mr. Lay," a voice called, sharp and precise, the judge. He opened his eyes. The gavel would soon fall. The sentence would be spoken. But in that suspended breath before the hammer, his mind drifted backwards back to where it all began, long before the cameras, long before the fraud, back to the boy who believed he could escape the dirt of Missouri. He had been born in poverty, the son of a Baptist minister. Their home was small, their meals humble. He remembered the smell of damp wood in winter, the scratch of cheap wool against his neck. His father preached humility and salvation, but Kenneth craved something different. Not the kingdom of heaven, but the kingdom of men, the kingdom of power. He watched his father struggle to feed the family and made a silent vow. He would never know that weakness. College became his first escape. Economics was his weapon. He spoke of markets as if they were poetry, invisible forces bending to the will of those clever enough to harness them. Professors admired him. Employers courted him. And in Houston, he found his arena. Energy. Oil, gas, electricity. These were not just commodities. They were the bloodstream of America. Control them, and you controlled destiny itself. The rise was intoxicating. By the 1980s, Lay was no longer a poor preacher's son. He was the architect of Enron, a company that would transform the very concept of energy. He promised deregulation would unleash miracles, that markets could be engineered to produce endless wealth. His words dripped with conviction. His smile radiated trust. Politicians adored him. Presidents shook his hand. Investors hung on his every word. He was, for a moment, untouchable. Boardrooms became his sanctuaries. The hum of air conditioning, the smell of leather chairs, the glint of crystal glasses filled with expensive scotch, these were his new rituals. "Gentlemen," he would begin, his voice calm but commanding, "the future is ours to shape." And the men around him believed it, because Lay made them believe it. He was not selling energy. He was selling a dream. But dreams, when inflated too far, become bubbles, and bubbles always burst. At first, the cracks were invisible. Accounting tricks, cleverly disguised by jargon and paperwork. Losses buried in special entities. Risks hidden behind walls of numbers too dense for outsiders to penetrate. Lay told himself it was temporary, just until the market shifted, just until the next quarter. "Everyone does it," he whispered in the quiet of his office. "It's not fraud, it's strategy." The stock price soared. Employees invested their life savings in Enron shares. Magazine covers hailed him as a genius, a pioneer of the new economy. And yet, in the shadows, the foundation was already rotting. Deals that looked golden were built on sand. Profits that glittered in press releases were nothing more than illusions conjured by accountants with trembling hands. Inside Enron's glass towers, the culture was feverish. Traders shouted across desks, betting millions as if they were tossing dice in a casino. Greed was not a sin. It was the air they breathed. "Make me money," Lay would say, half joking, but his eyes betrayed the demand. Those who delivered were rewarded with riches. Those who hesitated were discarded. The machine demanded constant feeding, and Lay was both its creator and its captive. He told himself he was doing good. Jobs were created. Investors were thrilled. America was stronger because of him. But beneath the polished speeches, a darker truth gnawed at him. The empire was hollow, and he knew it. When whispers began, he ignored them. Analysts questioning Enron's numbers. Journalists digging into the accounting. Regulators circling like vultures. Lay smiled, reassured investors, and insisted everything was fine. "Our fundamentals are strong," he declared, his voice smooth, his eyes steady. But behind closed doors, he felt the walls tightening. He could smell it, the sour scent of fear. Then came the collapse. October 2001. The headlines screamed, "Enron admits massive losses." The stock price plummeted like a stone thrown into deep water. Employees' retirement savings evaporated overnight. Once loyal executives turned on each other like starving wolves. Phone lines buzzed with betrayal. Offices emptied in silence. The empire was falling, faster than even Lay could comprehend. He tried to hold it together. Press conferences, reassurances, promises that tomorrow would be brighter. But each word felt thinner than the last, a ghost of credibility that no one believed anymore. Senators summoned him. Cameras followed him. He was no longer the king of Houston. He was the face of greed, the embodiment of corruption. The betrayal cut deepest when it came from those closest to him. Men who had once toasted his name now testified against him. Friends avoided his calls. Politicians who had once embraced him now spoke of him with disgust. He was alone, surrounded by enemies wearing familiar faces. By 2006, the trial consumed him. He walked into the courtroom each day with his chin high, but the mask was cracking. His hair was thinner, his smile forced, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He listened as prosecutors painted him not as a visionary, but as a thief, a manipulator, a liar who had stolen billions through deceit. Every word landed like a blow. Every witness another dagger. At night, in the silence of his home, he replayed his speeches in his head. The promises, the boasts, the lies disguised as vision. He wondered when the turning point had truly been. Was it the first off-balance sheet entity? The first false number signed off? Or was it much earlier, when he vowed never to be poor again, no matter the cost? The jury deliberated. The world waited. Lay sat still, his palms sweating against the polished wood of the defense table. The verdict was guilty. 6 counts of conspiracy and fraud. The empire builder was now a criminal. The applause was gone. The only sound was the scratching of pens as journalists captured his disgrace for eternity. As the judge prepared his sentence, Lay's thoughts drifted again. He remembered the boy in Missouri, the son of a preacher, promising himself that he would never be weak. And now, at the end, he was weaker than ever. Not because of poverty, but because of shame. Because of the hollow empire that had devoured him whole. He inhaled slowly, trying to steady himself. The fluorescent lights hummed louder. The gavel hovered. The abyss yawned. And Kenneth Lay knew this was only the beginning of his fall. The gavel struck like thunder, and the sound seemed to reverberate through his very bones. Kenneth Lay had spent decades mastering the art of controlling numbers, controlling markets, controlling perceptions. But here, in this sterile temple of justice, he was stripped bare. The courtroom didn't care about his charm, his polished words, or his political connections. Here, truth was not something he could manufacture. He was released on bond, awaiting sentencing. But the word guilty echoed louder than any verdict. Guilty of conspiracy. Guilty of fraud. Guilty of betraying the very people who trusted him. The empire of Enron, once valued at over $60 billion, had disintegrated into dust. Employees were left penniless, pension funds destroyed, investors ruined, and yet Lay still clung to a shred of denial. He told reporters he was innocent, that he had done nothing wrong, that the truth would vindicate him. But deep inside, when the cameras shut off, he knew vindication would never come. Nights became unbearable. He would pace the halls of his Houston home, the silence broken only by the ticking of an expensive clock. Every room smelled faintly of polished wood and old money, but even the luxury now felt like mockery. His wife tried to soothe him, her voice gentle, but he barely heard her. Memories haunted him instead, the cheers of Enron employees when the stock soared, the blinding flashbulbs when he shook the president's hand, the weight of applause crashing over him like waves. Those sounds were gone, replaced by the hollow hum of emptiness. He remembered walking through the Enron lobby years earlier, the rotating logo spinning proudly, a symbol of triumph. "We're not just an energy company," he had told a group of wide-eyed interns. "We're the future." His voice had carried conviction, but even then, deep down, there had been a whisper. What if it's all a lie? The whisper had grown into a roar. As his sentencing approached, the walls pressed tighter. The prosecutors painted him as a man who had engineered lies to enrich himself while others suffered. Employees testified about lost retirement funds, investors about destroyed futures. The newspapers called him the face of corporate greed, a snake in a suit. He read the headlines in silence, each word slicing deeper than the last. But Lay still played the role he had always known, the optimist, the preacher of markets. He told friends he would appeal, that justice would correct itself, that he would walk free. Yet in private, in the darkness of early morning, he felt his chest tighten, his heart strain, his breath falter. Stress was devouring him from within. The truth was unbearable. He was no longer a titan of industry, no longer a visionary. He was a criminal awaiting punishment. Prison loomed a word he could barely bring himself to imagine. Steel bars, gray uniforms, the smell of bleach and sweat. The humiliation of being just another inmate. For Kenneth Lay, the man who had once dined with presidents, the thought was worse than death, and death was closer than anyone knew. July 2006, Colorado. Lay had retreated to his vacation home, high in the mountains, far from the chaos of Houston. The air was thin, the pine trees swayed in the breeze, and the world felt quieter there. But inside him, the storm never ceased. He carried the weight of disgrace in every heartbeat, every strained breath. Friends had abandoned him, his reputation shredded. He was waiting for the judge to pronounce his sentence, but he would never hear it. That morning, he rose early. The sky was streaked with pale light. The mountains cast long shadows across the earth. He sat in silence, his chest heavy, his body trembling. Then, without warning, his heart gave way. The man who had conquered markets, who had played God with billions, collapsed in stillness. The official cause, a massive heart attack. But some whispered that shame had killed him just as surely as clogged arteries. News of his death spread like wildfire. Some expressed sympathy for his family. Many did not mourn at all. For thousands of employees and investors whose lives had been destroyed by Enron's collapse, Lay's death was seen not as tragedy, but as escape. He would never serve a day in prison. He would never stand in an orange jumpsuit. He would never truly face the punishment his victims longed to see. To them, justice had been stolen once again. In Houston, his funeral was held in a grand church, stained glass casting colored light across polished pews. Friends and family remembered him as kind, generous, a man of faith. They spoke of his humble beginnings, his charitable donations, his devotion to God. But outside those walls, the world saw a different man, the architect of one of the greatest corporate frauds in history. A preacher's son who built an empire of lies and died before paying the price. Even in death, controversy followed him. Some conspiracy theories whispered that he had faked his death, that he had fled to an island with hidden billions. Others argued that his passing was too convenient, sparing him from prison. But the truth, stripped of rumor and speculation, was simpler. Kenneth Lay died broken, consumed by the very greed that once defined him. And so his story became a warning, carved into the annals of corporate America. A tale of ambition that devoured itself, of power that turned to ash, of a man who rose from poverty to the heights of wealth, only to be crushed by the lies he created. Yet, in the quiet of history, one question remains unanswered. Did Kenneth Lay truly believe in his innocence, or did he know, deep inside, that he had sold illusions to the world? Did he see himself as a criminal, or as a victim of the same system he had manipulated? The truth lies buried with him, in a Colorado grave far from the glittering towers of Houston. But the echo of his fall still lingers. The shattered lives of Enron employees, the betrayed trust of investors, the cynicism that poisoned Wall Street for years to come. That is Kenneth Lay's legacy, not the empire he built, but the ruins he left behind. And perhaps, if there is an afterlife, he walks once more through that grand Enron lobby, the logo spinning endlessly, the applause of ghosts ringing in his ears. But this time, he knows the truth. This time, the cheers are hollow. This time, the temple is empty. The boy who vowed never to be poor had won his battle with poverty, but in his victory, he had lost everything else. In the end, Kenneth Lay was not destroyed by poverty, or by competition, or even by the law. He was destroyed by himself, by ambition untethered from truth, by lies told so often they became indistinguishable from belief, by the weight of an empire built on nothing. And when his heart finally broke, it was not just the end of a man. It was the collapse of an illusion. The lights fade, the silence lingers, and the story of Kenneth Lay remains a dark reminder. Empires built on deception are destined to collapse, and the fall is always louder than the rise.